Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So Star Trek Discovery came out. Actually, let me make sure. Yeah, I'm seeing green everywhere, and I am hearing voice. Good. Star Trek Discovery came out, and you know I am an amazing Trekkie. I am an amazing Trekkie. I've had the opportunity to see the first 2 episodes. Now, there was a lot of talk about this being a train wreck and everything else. So there was a bit of concern surrounding what Discovery was going to look like. It was actually pretty damn good. It was pretty damn good. I liked it. I am going to geek out, so forgive me. I'm going to geek out. It's going to be a contained geeking out, but it's going to be a bit of a geeking out. Star Trek, and look, there's going to be a few spoilers because I need to talk about spoilers in order to get to the point that I'm trying to get at. They've changed history a little bit. So they're saying that Sarek, Spock's dad, had another kid. Now the kid was pulled from ruins, African-American black woman. It was a black child. And he raised her. Meaning Spock's, dad essentially raised a black young woman. She was raised on Vulcan. She, for the most part, functioned and acted as a Vulcan, even though she was a human being. By the time she got to the ship, though, there was a certain integration of this idea of what it means to be Vulcan versus what it means to be a human being. Now, this yielded interesting results, and it kind of is the thing that kicked off the show. In one particular argument on the show, the guy, let me put it this way. There's Klingons are trying to merge their houses together. Klingons are infighting. They're going after one another. It's like they're just a bunch of warring tribes in space. Now, in being warring tribes in space, one gets this idea of how do we unify? How do we unify? We're going to unify all of the houses together and stop all of this petty bickering and stop all this petty fighting. I know how you unify. You unify in the name of something great. Meaning, in their case, Kalis. We're going to unify under this idea of Kalis. And we're going to do that by becoming a warrior race again. And unify by attacking Starfleet. We essentially scapegoat Starfleet. When they say they come in peace, don't believe it. It's not peace. They're trying to subjugate you. They want you in with all of these other races. They want you to lose your distinctiveness as Klingons. Fight back. Join us. Fight back. And that's essentially what took place. All of these houses of Klingons come together, and all of these houses and tribes attack and massacre the Federation in this one particular war, or this one particular battle. Now, she's having a conversation before they attacked, and she's trying to convince them that, look, the Klingons are bloodthirsty. Mind you, Klingons killed their parents. That's the other catch for this. So there's certainly an emotional thing here, even though she's raised to be somewhat non-emotional. It was almost like a scar on Vulcan being emotional in a sense. So she, for the most part, she pushed her feelings down like other Vulcans, but she's fundamentally human. It doesn't work as well with humans. Now, in the awesome cases, in having this argument, she's making this point to him like, look, Klingons are bloodthirsty. You have to do it from a racial standpoint. And the guy says, you should know better coming from your race. That you should know better trying to classify these guys as something based on race. And she made the point, culture and race are different things. There's a vast difference between race and culture. Let's talk about that. That's a fascinating point. And there are 2 fascinating points I want to talk about. The warring in the Klingon Empire and their solution to that. And this kind of conversation about culture and race. And she's right, culture and race are different things. If you take any kid alive today as a child and you transport them back to Nazi Germany, they're going to be Nazis. You take any kid that was grown in Nazi Germany and you raise them in America, they're going to be Americans. It's your society. It's your society. It's your society. This is not something that's ingrained in people. These people don't grow up being Nazis or capitalists or anything else. They're, for the most part, blank slates from the standpoint of ideology. To some degree, they're blank slates. Don't get me wrong. People have certain propensities based on how they're wired. There is an aspect of that that's wiring. But even that is to a certain level of degrees based upon the societal and external influence. It's the culture. That's the point I'm getting at. It's what you're raised in. It's what you're immersed in. It's not your race. Race has nothing to do with it. Human beings, regardless of where they're raised, regardless of how they look, meaning Chinese, Black, Asian, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the culture they're raised in. It's the culture they're raised in. It's not like somebody who's Black has a predisposition to X. Somebody who's Asian has a predisposition to Y. No. No. That's the point she was getting at. She was raised on Vulcan. She thinks from the standpoint of a Vulcan. Now, there was a jarring aspect to this show. And I'm going to move on to the Klingon thing, but I want to talk about this part also. And when I mean jarring. Particularly for somebody who's watched Star Trek for a very long time. And you have this kind of feel for Star Trek officers, how these guys behave with one another. She mutinied. Now, she mutinied because she thought fervently, we need to attack that ship. We need to attack that ship. The captain disagreed with her. She wouldn't stand down. The captain continued to disagree with her. And she Vulcan neck pinched the captain. That's a mind-blowing thing. It's not just a mutiny. You assaulted the captain of your ship. Think back to Picard and Riker. Can you ever imagine Riker just knocking Picard out? Can you ever imagine Spock knocking Kirk out in some situation? Like, this is a mind-blowing thing for anybody who watches Star Trek. It's shocking to see. She comes back out and is like, fire on that ship. And the guy's like, wait, where's the captain? Did the captain ask you to do this? In which case, she didn't get what she wanted. She didn't get to fire on that ship. But look, if she would have fired on that ship, they would have been decimated because there were 16, 17 other ships that were coming right behind it within seconds. It was a good episode, man. It was a decent episode. That was just a shocking thing to see. And the thing is, when I think back over other episodes, it's not without historical basis in regards to Star Trek canon. Vulcans will take a logical process and say, look, it was logical for me to do this because my captain couldn't or because some other regulation couldn't. They have this utilitarian view of things. The needs of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Whatever maximizes happiness for the most is correct. That's the most good. That's just a logical deduction of what's right, what's ethical. Now, in her case, they're going to start a war. If we don't do this, we're going to end up in a war. I must fire on them. I must knock out my captain because if I don't, they're going to start a war. So you can understand this kind of logical process in her head of, this is a logical deduction that I must do this in order to prevent this. There was an episode where Tuvok on Voyager decides to do something that was against Janeway's expressed order. Don't go down to the planet. Don't make that trade. Tuvok did it anyway. Now, Tuvok's reasoning was the captain was bound by certain Star Trek edicts, Star Trek laws. The captain couldn't do it. As captain of the ship, she can't necessarily do that. Because she can't do that, I myself will take the hit. I will make the choice to go down and do this. It is necessary because it's more right for me to go to prison and to have this ship go home or get closer back to Earth than it is to not do this. For him, it was just a basic logical deduction. I must do this. This is the most right based on the situation. That was her same process. It's just a jarring thing to see somebody knock out the captain of a ship. Now, the second point I want to talk about is the Klingon thing. So, Klingons in this universe are warring houses. All of these various houses and all of these houses, for the most part, are fighting one another. They're in calamity. Humanity, for the most part, hadn't seen Klingons for a very, very long time. When she mentioned there are Klingons out there, they didn't believe her at first. What do you mean they're Klingons? Nobody has seen a Klingon in God knows how long. One of the tribes, one of the Klingon houses, made the determination that he wanted to unite the other houses. We're stronger together than we are, fighting each other. But he realized he has nothing to do this with. How can I unite these houses? I have an idea. I can unite these houses by focusing us on an external enemy. Somebody out there. Not us, somebody out there. We can externalize all of the issues that we have that are keeping us essentially fighting one another. The thing is, nothing has really been solved. He's just kind of done this us versus them thing. We're Klingons. This is what we want. We're Klingons. We're going to remain pure in this sense. The argument that he's using, though, is immensely xenophobic. Like, going so far as to say that they're a threat to us. The reason they're a threat to us is because they seek to bring us into their federation. Their federation has all of these dirty races. We don't want to be a part of those dirty races. We don't want to lose our distinctiveness as Klingons. So we're going to fight them. We must fight them. And in fighting them, we will be united. And he's rallying behind the banner of Kahless. There's a Rick and Morty episode of the egg, and even a Batman episode. This is a philosophical thing. This thing of creating this kind of spectacle. It's like this belief that people need to be led by this kind of false narrative of sorts. Having something that's there that they can focus themselves on and focus and rally behind and inject themselves into. It doesn't have to be real. It just needs to be there as somewhat of a beacon. Think of the Dark Knight episode in Batman, where Batman says, "Let them hunt me." He wants Harvey Dent to be this kind of spectacle of truth that the city can rally its hopes around. He would take the burden. He's Batman. He's Batman. The Rick and Morty episode of the egg, where that egg was a child molester. I'm sorry, it's not funny of the child molester, but the egg was a child molester. And they were like, no, hide those photos. It's better that the town remembers him as a great man. It's this type of mentality of people need this kind of image, this kind of godlike image of something, or it doesn't have to be true. It could be a false narrative. But as long as that narrative is captivating enough, it's fair game. That's what he's using. In this case, the sword of Kahless. Kahless, we're this warrior race. We're getting back to our roots. We're going to be Klingons. It's a good episode. Essentially, the Federation is now at war with the Klingon Empire. This guy is a xenophobic maniac. And the question becomes, how far do they push it? Now look, he was killed in the first episode. So they've essentially made a martyr of the guy. So now, this thing that was started, they went over there to try to capture him and take him prisoner, but that didn't go well. He ends up getting killed. Turns into a martyr. They're now at war with the Klingon Empire. The Federation is a discovery icon, or a discovery organization. It's not a militaristic organization. At one point it was, and the military switched over to be this kind of exploration force. But Klingons, war is what they do. War is what they do. And I know in the last timeline of Star Trek, the original, the real timeline of Star Trek, when there was a blip, it was a historical blip, and an event didn't take place. And because that event didn't take place, the Federation ended up in war with the Klingon Empire. And the Federation was losing that war. They were losing that war. In fact, they were going to lose. It was projected that they were going to lose. They took Picard aside and saying, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. We have 6 months. So if that's the universe that they're in, meaning if that's the situation to which they find themselves, they better pull a rabbit out of their hat, because in the other timeline, they got their ass handed to them. So this should be interesting. Her character dilemma is fascinating to me. You're trying to meld this dynamic of this kind of emotional nature of what it is to be a person. Like, understand, there's certain things that are just human. Like, yes, we can be flexible in regards to our living situations and everything else. We can be flexible in regards to the society to which we're arranged. But there is something about, there is a humanness to us. There is something distinct. Anywhere around the globe, people laugh the same. They laugh the same. For the most part, humor is the same. It's almost like it's built into us. The facial expressions that people make, for the most part, are the same. Everyone has their hopes. Those hopes can be constrained by the society itself. They can be emboldened by the society. All of that's true. But ultimately, people just want to live their lives. They just want to live their lives. I'm saying there's a distinctiveness in humanity to that. Giving up emotion. I'm skeptical that that could be done. It might be able to be ignored by years of meditation. It may be downplayed by living in a society that, for the most part, tries to do away with it and looks down upon it. All of that's true. But getting rid of it, that's an interesting dilemma to have a human being living on Vulcan. We've seen Vulcans living with humans, like Spock or Tuvok or whatever. But this is different. She was actually raised on Vulcan. For the most part, she thinks logically in this sense. And yet, she is an emotional creature. This thing of mutiny was an emotional act. Now, she may say, I got to it by logical deduction and all this other stuff. But she made a leap of logic. And based on that leap of logic, attacked her captain. My wife looked at that and says, that bitch is going to prison. She said, if the show comes back on and they don't lock her up, I am no longer watching Star Trek. When the show came back on, they took her to the brig. Right away, took her to the brig, court-martialed her, and sent her to the life in prison. My wife was like, oh, wow, yeah. Okay. That's what I expected. Yeah, that's what I expected too. You attacked the captain. Yeah, man, it's good. I like it so far. I like it. Star Trek has these ethical dilemmas, man, that are fascinating to deal with. One of the other cultures, one of the guys, oh man, this is going 18 minutes, this is going long. One of the other guys on the ship was raised as a slave race. He was raised as what he said in human circles would be cows. There were 2 races on the planet, or 2 species. The other species was bred to be dominant. His species was bred to be submissive. And in being bred to be submissive, for the most part, they were treated as cows. He's making so you have this interesting dilemma of having certain things built into you. Like on a genetic level, built into you. And you're dealing with the ship of all these other different species. This kind of cosmopolitanism where you have one species after the next, after the next, after the next, and all of them, I guess, submits to a baseline order so they each can interact with the other. In his case, he's skittish. He's terrified of pretty much everything. He's skeptical of everything. But again, he's genetically built in that way. He was bred in that way. It's a fascinating show. I mean, you hear all these people sometimes like, I did this on my own. You could have been born in Pakistan. You could have been born in Pakistan. You could have been born in one of those countries where they were bombing. Your birth is a quirk of nature. It was a luck at best. I mean, you can invoke God into the mix and everything else. Fair enough. I have no evidence of that. I only can deal with it, particularly when we're talking about this idea of law, this idea of how we organize ourselves as a society. God has nothing to do with it. That's us. That's purely us. It was a quirk. It was luck. You ended up into a particular family. You ended up with a particular body. Congratulations. We should look after one another. That's my point. That's my point. I love Star Trek. I love it. I can geek out on a lot of the stuff. The uniforms are sleek and sexy. I like it. I even like the graphics of this particular one. They've changed the Klingons, but that's not bad to me. That's not too ridiculous. There was a change in the Klingons in the show anyway between the original series and Next Generation. Worf, when asked about it, said, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. We don't bring that up. But I don't think this is the mainline universe. If I'm not mistaken, they've kind of taken a different universe to this. It's before Enterprise. So there's like a young James C. Kirk somewhere. It's a good show, man. Check it out. Let's see. Quark made a solid argument as to why Ferengis were morally superior to humans. Ferenginar was a mess, man. I'm sorry. But look, that's their value system. That's how Quark was raised. Like, they were raised in a world that was normal. That was perfectly normal. The thing is, you can have any arrangement of society providing you're willing to deal with the consequences of that arrangement. You've heard me say it before. I say it all the time because it's kind of it's almost like a truism. What's the society you want? It's like if you're playing chess, certain openings are going to give you a certain configuration of the board. There are certain benefits and drawbacks depending on what it is. Life is that way. So yes, you can have this kind of bloodthirsty capitalistic society where, you know, you have oligarchs ruling in their own self-interest with diminishing returns to everyone else. But then you're going to have to deal with war, poverty, crime, drug use, all of these things, depletion of the environment, degradation of the environment or the ecology. These things are consequences of how we organize ourselves. So if you're going with the ideology that ultimately ends up in your own destruction, I would say that ideology is irrational. Now, to say that you're morally superior to human beings when they're like Ferenginar was like a black, dark, dusty, dirty planet. Business for the most part ruled everything. Women weren't allowed to talk to men in any particular way. If I'm not mistaken, they were supposed to walk around naked. Humanity at that point, there was no poverty. Crime was next to nothing. Humanity had got itself together. Their value system changed. How they interacted with one another changed. And look, part of that wasn't so much that they just, you know, they got better in society and maintained capitalism and everything else. Part and parcel to that was them getting rid of capitalism. There was no such thing as money. They got rid of cash. Now, part of the reason I would imagine they got rid of cash is because you have all the resources you need on your planet to do anything you want. You do not have enough cash to do it. Cash is a hindrance to getting things done. If you create an economic system, if you create incentive structures built into your system, your model, the way you organize your society, you have all the resources in the world to get anything done that you need. Imagine a society where every kid around the world can go to school anytime they want. Meaning they can take any course. They can stay in college to any degree that they want to stay in college. They have their choice. Their needs are met. They're not going to go broke. They're not going to go hungry. They're going to have all their needs met, meaning they can focus on actual other things. You're still going to have your doctors. You're still going to have your construction workers. Most of these things are going to be automated at this point. The labor that people do is usually the labor that people are going to want to do. There are going to be things that society needs to keep itself going. And in those situations, yeah, you're going to have to come up with some incentive structure in society itself. If that's credits, if that's some kind of cash, fair enough. As long as this other stuff is taken care of, I don't particularly care. I don't particularly care. But imagine the situation. Imagine all of the physicists, all of the scientists, all of the technologists, all of those people in all of those countries that are dirt poor right now. Imagine all of those people having access to higher education. What does the world look like when they have their needs met? Meaning they have time to actually do research. They have time to investigate, to experiment. They have time to actually do actual science. You're talking about unleashing a potential that the world has never seen before. Cash is the hindrance. Ultimately, that is the Star Trek universe. When you're talking about Star Trek, they don't have cash in that way. Yes, they have bars. Yes, they have restaurants. They have all those things. But cash is not necessarily a part of their society. If you notice, they don't have all of these different companies. When Starfleet gets this thing, it's a Starfleet made jacket, a Starfleet made, shirt or pants and shoes and all this other stuff. At some point, they realized that, hey, we need to do this differently. Mind you, this is not communism or anything else. This is, for the most part, letting technology make the decisions on how we organize ourselves, if I'm making that point. I'm trying to make this point that once you meet your needs in your society, and I'm making the point poorly, but once you meet your needs in society, meaning you have the resources to meet the needs in your society, you have to be mindful of ecology. You can't necessarily off yourself based upon the things that you're doing in your society. So ecology has to be a real world thing. It has to be something built into the fabric of how you do your society, how you live your lives. And yeah, you wouldn't have all of these different companies doing the exact same thing. You would build products to last. If something needs to be upgraded, fair enough, but ultimately you're building products to last. At this point, though, you don't have a society based on, we need people to work just for the sake of working, we need to generate profit and all this other stuff. That stuff is out the window. You're doing things because you need to do those things. We need to build a bridge, we need to build something else, and you're doing what's best, because again, cash is not part of the process. The dilemma is trying to figure out a way to get that to work. Now, you have Jack Fresco, who's come up with the Venus Project. It's an interesting idea. And I have some criticisms of it, but those criticisms might just be based in my ignorance of everything that's associated with it. And look, he could be immensely dogmatic, so don't get me wrong. I wouldn't necessarily follow each and every tenet Jack Fresco. There have been plenty of things where I'm like, oh my God, this guy's too far. Or it's too hardcore. But if you're talking about just the bare bone basics, that's a Star Trek society. What he's talking about is essentially Star Trek. That's essentially what he's talking about. Let's see. Please state the nature of the financial emergency. That part of the original Trek was groundbreaking. Heard it into gimme camps off-world. They have psychologists for every 3 people. The real Federation reminds me more of Clockwork Orange than some utopia. There's no such thing as utopia, dude. Garnome, you could be a little bit of a pessimist, dude. I'm just saying. That's not a criticism at all. I don't mean that as a criticism. It's somewhat of a darker view. I put it that way. It's like call the Federation dark Clockwork Orange. No, they've just grown up. They've just grown up. They've just become rational human beings. They look like Clockwork Orange to us because they're rational human beings. They're aware. Their values have changed. I mean, if you're looking for a society of human beings that may work, right there, that's society. They've organized themselves in a way that says, okay, how do we maximize the potential of the citizens of our world, and how do we get rid of poverty? How do we get rid of all of these things that have plagued mankind for all of this time? How do we do this? We've just had a massive war. We've just had a 3rd World War, with, if I'm not mistaken, with nuclear weapons. We need to do something different. you've had citizens coming together, rational, for the first time. I hear people make this argument about humanity being rational animals. We're fucking killing ourselves. Like, the things that we're doing around the planet is irrational. I understand it's rational and irrational at the same time. Overall, it's irrational. In a micro sense, meaning from a day-to-day sense, yes, there's a rationality to it. You're in a game space. They're trying to maximize the profit in that game space for themselves. The game space gives them feedback. It has feedback mechanisms. You do X, yes, you're doing something that's horrible for the environment. Yes, you're doing something that's horrible for another human being. But here's more cash. This more cash gives me more access. It gives me more power in this game space. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm getting more cash back. I'm getting a positive feedback for doing the negative behavior. So yes, in that sense, it makes sense. But think about a global situation, like from the standpoint looking outside of Earth. You have a planet that's a real thing. The people on that planet are real things. The cash that this guy's making is not. The plagues that are going to befall this planet will be real things also. We're destroying our habitable space. We're even destroying ourselves just in the way we interact with things, meaning food's becoming less nutritious based upon the carbon that we're blowing into the sky. We've killed off massive amounts of animal species. What, like 40% of the extinctions that have taken place in the last 50 years. That by itself is mind-blowing. That by itself is mind-blowing. We're killing ourselves. The scientists are out there with their hairs on fire saying, we're killing ourselves. We're going to cook ourselves. These hurricanes are going to get worse. We're completely unprepared for it. And the sad part about it is, many of these Republican governors will say, in these southern territories, Texas, Florida, do you think they're hardening their state? Do you think they're spending money to harden their state? Or are they giving tax cuts? Do you believe they're trying to harden their infrastructure to make sure communication will be maintained? To make sure they can continue to get power, energy to people, or food for that matter, the ability for those people to be able to leave in an orderly fashion, not necessarily piled on one stretch of land or one roadway? Or are they giving tax cuts? They're giving tax cuts. So yes, there's a wolf at the door. Yes, there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet. Yes, the water level is going to rise. Yes, the hurricanes are going to get worse. No, they're not going to do anything about it. They're trying to maximize their profits. Man grew up. That's the point I'm getting at. No rational person lives in this way. There is no rational society that would allow somebody to have $1 billion and somebody else to live on the street. At least not a rational society that looks at the human being as having some level of value. Yeah. Hey, look, my point is they grew up. What looks strange to us is purely from our context. From their context, we're barbarians. On the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, when Q was reading man his sins, you are barbarians. You guys are apes. Go back home, you apes. Go back home, you apes. You're murderers. Here are your sins. Read your sins. And he was going to hold and prosecute man for his sins. Picard standing in place of man for all of mankind. Picard didn't want to read those sins. He didn't want to read those crimes. He felt that this was hogwash. I shouldn't be held to the standard. Q didn't necessarily let him off the hook. Q gave the order to essentially kill anybody who says anything other than guilty. Now, yes, he's trying to coerce a verdict, but he's trying to make a point. You guys are apes. You guys are apes. You've been killing one another left and right. You had a land full of plentiful resources, an entire planet at your disposal. You've had technology at your disposal. And what you've done with it is just make a very few people rich and had everyone else exploited. You apes. You apes. Picard's only answer to this is, we grew up. We grew up. At a certain point, we realized that if human beings have value, we need to reorganize our society in a way to express that value. Yes, we grew up. And so our values changed. We begin to value the human being more than this idea of profit. Yes, our values changed. We look different because our values are different. Picard was aghast at being hit with these charges. My point is, he's being aghast at us. That is man 400-500 years into the future looking back at us, and he's aghast. He's aghast. Like, if I find that to be an amazing commentary, because he's somewhat right. If you pull yourself out this context, we have a terrifying reality. Like looking at them and saying they look like Clockwork Orange. Look at us. What are we? What are we? We have people killed in the street by cops. We have all these people put into our prisons left and right. We have a third the population of China and more people in our prisons. Put that in context. Home of the free, land of the brave. All of these people in prison. Many of these people are in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. Somebody getting locked up by an alcoholic cop for smoking pot. We have a terrifying reality. If you lose your job, you could be on the street. Now, not because we don't have resources. We have resources. We have empty homes also. We have more than enough food to eat. Many of these stores throw away their foods at a certain point. No, you just don't have access. Our society allows it. It's okay. Everyone goes about their day. We know the chaos that we cause in the world, the number of people we murder left and right. The president had to kill us. Think about that. How does that sit with you? The president. I'm going to kill this guy today. Go get that guy and kill that guy. And the majority of the people being hit when the president is ordering those murders are civilians. They look like Clockwork Orange. What do we look like? What do we look like? Look, man, I would take the Star Trek universe any day of the week. There are certain things that I would imagine would be fucking annoying. No place is utopia. You fight for those things and try to change those aspects because people change continuously to some degree. You try to find something better and you try to reorganize yourself in ways that are better. It's always a moving target. Your technology to some degree changes and alters how you are organized. Meaning the level of your society or the level of excesses or I guess potential of your society to some degree is what's the word I'm looking for? It's dependent upon the technological level of that society. Yeah. It's like the greater your technology, the better your technology. Now the catch becomes whether that technology is used for the benefit of the whole. Now in our case, technology is not used for the benefit of the whole. It's used as this kind of predatory thing to beat down labor. People dislike technological innovation because they believe that it's going to take away their jobs. And those people are absolutely right. Any sane and rational society will use technology as a freeing mechanism. We don't use it that way. We use it as a way of boosting profits and raising those profits to the ceiling while firing workers in the process. We have a terrifying society. You're just accustomed to it. Bob Porter, Devil in the Dark. Let's see. Star Trek had miners that revolted. Yeah. I'm well aware of our real world deficiencies. That's my point. Star Trek world would require psychological and physical controls. I mean, it depends, right? I mean, this is kind of my point when I'm saying their value system change. if a civilization has a third world war, say Trump attacks North Korea. North Korea launches, hits Japan, and hits Seoul. Millions of people are dead within the first 30-40 minutes. They invade North Korea, and for the most part, they do what militaries do. They destroy that country. But in the process of destroying that country, they also destroy Japan, South Korea. Let alone if North Korea gets off a nuclear bomb. Hell, they may nuke themselves in the process of the United States invading the country. What is Russia to do in this situation? What is China to do in this situation? Say the United States persists in Syria and they shoot down a Russian jet. Russia retaliates. There are already reports of Russia saying it will retaliate if the United States shoots down anything from Syria or Russia. Any attack on Russia and any conflict with Russia is a nuclear war. Any attack on Russia also involves China and probably Iran. I'm just making this point that you can see this thing where these dominoes start to line up, where all of these forces are kind of joining together to topple whatever that world order is at the time, particularly when that world order gets out of hand. That's a nuclear conflict, by the way. That's a nuclear war. At the end of that nuclear war, the people who survive 100 years, 200 years, have those people fundamentally changed when everything that they know is destroyed? Then if those people fundamentally change, would they start to ask real questions of, how do we do this right? How do we change this? How do we make this so it's not the way it was before? If those people can instantiate a society, a framework, then yes, I do believe that you can kind of get this kind of Star Trek-ish world without necessarily having these restraints. The people themselves would be the restraint. That's what I'm getting at. If it's a value system change. Now, if you are bringing people up in a society where people trust one another, you have a fundamentally different society. If you have a society based on cooperation, you have a fundamentally different society. Our context, how we are in our society, is always adversarial. Doesn't matter what it is. If you're trying to get a job, you're trying to get a job competing against other people. If you're trying to, in your job, to try to get an advancement in that job, you're, again, competing with the elements in that job itself. Politics, same thing. Complete competition. Who's going to take office? Competition. When it gets to the point where the competition matters more than the actual apparatus, you have a problem. But that's what you can see happening in our government. That's what you can see happening even in companies at times. What happens when that's cooperative? Like that's instantiated in your society, a cooperative society. What does that society look like? I would argue it's a fundamentally different society. It's probably more trusting. People always act like this thing that human nature is a certain way. Human nature can be a certain way. Give it different stimuli. I'm saying, if those people are starting a fundamentally different society, they prioritize using technology to deal with this question of need. They make sure that each and every person has the things that they need. You have, right off the bat, a fundamentally different society where technology, it's handling, where questions are asked not from a political standpoint, but from this, what's the best way to do X? What's the technological solution to do X? You still have labor in that society, but you have a fundamentally different society. People are people. Now the question becomes, in that society, is that cohesive enough where this idea of policemen are unnecessary? Where this idea of force and all this other stuff becomes somewhat unnecessary? Or what they would consider force in that society is much more scaled down, this kind of peace officers being actual peace officers. I have a hard time seeing any situation that doesn't have something like that. So, fair enough. But that is a fundamentally different society. That's all I'm saying. I would even imagine that those people would be more rational. But I could be wrong. This could be my optimism showing through. Yeah, this could be my optimism just shining through. Strong men create religion, government to keep the tribe together. Yeah, man. So this is the Klingon thing too. There is a philosophical argument, and I can't think who makes the argument. I can't think of the guy's name, but it makes this case of I think I mentioned that before. It's like the kind of idol thing, the false idol that people can worship in order to get behind and rally people around. Yeah, I mean, even Lenin had these ideas that people need to be rallied, that Marx was wrong on this idea that there was going to be a glorious emancipatory revolution, that workers would rise up and they'd take their pitchforks and they'd run to the post office. Lenin and some of these guys were making the point that that's not going to happen. It doesn't work that way. The workers, they're asleep. They're sheep. They need to be rallied by something. Something needs to catch their attention and kind of bring them over to your side. And a false idol tends to do that in one of two ways. That guy's the problem. Meaning you have this group of infighting and the person says, okay, we need a scapegoat. That guy's an issue. That guy's the problem. No, the entire group turns its attention to the scapegoat. And they kick the scapegoat out. And now they kick the scapegoat out. They're fighting again. The problems didn't belong in the scapegoat. The problems belong with the way that they were interacting with each other, or the deficiencies in the way they organize their society. But the scapegoat is almost like a release valve. So there's that part. But there's also, again, this kind of false idol worship. Yeah. I would love to live in Star Trek. Yeah, that's Jacobs. I'd be willing to give it a shot to live in Star Trek. Can't be worse than here. I don't know why anybody would like to live in Star Trek. If you were born and raised in the Star Trek universe, you understand all of your needs are met. There is no such thing as poverty. Like, quantify the mom that don't have enough to feed her kid. What is that? What is the human toll of pain in this situation? Like, are you willing to perpetuate that 1,000 and 1,000,000 times over all across the world every day? That's our society. Why is there any question of somebody not wanting to live in the Star Trek universe? All of your needs are met. When you get up in the morning, you do what you want to do. Not because you have to, but because you want to do it. And ultimately, if you want to be a scientist, that path is there for you. You can go to school as long as you want. You can study whatever you want. It's up to you. The society looks for the ways for human beings to be emancipated. It's a nurturing society. Like, there's probably not a situation where somebody opens up a McDonald's because there's no fry cooks. There are no fry cooks. By the same token, you're not going to have a situation with somebody having food that's, just shitty food, like a McDonald's hamburger or whatever else. It's not based on cost. The equation goes away. It becomes this thing of what's best for the person. How do we make the best hamburger that's best for the person if we have animal agriculture? How do we make the best this or that? Across the board. Oh man, I would love to live in the Star Trek universe. I'd imagine I'd chafe at some things. I'd imagine that anybody would chafe at something. And, in every society there'd be things that you would hate. But choosing to get rid of crime and poverty, yes, I do it. I do it. Now, see, here's the thing, Gardner, and I'll give you this one. What happens when somebody's not on board with the Star Trek universe? Like, so, what happens when somebody is born that's not necessarily on board with what's going on? Because people do change at some point. Like, people do have these, you're going to always have some segments of society that are geared a particular way. Now, granted, they're going to be immersed in a nurturing society that for the most part is trusting and everything else, and their needs are going to be met. So there's going to be fewer of these people who are going to be against whatever. But they're going to be there. What happens when these people exploit something that takes place? and starts to accrue a little bit more power, and the society becomes a little bit more contentious? What are the regulatory mechanisms built into the society that will prevent that society from eating itself alive? That's what I'm saying. There's no such thing as utopia. If people have freedom, they have freedom to fuck up. They have freedom to fuck up. You end up with this problem of people degrading, if that makes sense. Like, how do you create a situation where people are... Your lessons that you learned after the nuclear blast were hard won. They were hard won. 10 generations from that nuclear blast, what are those people like? You create a society. You put your stamp in that society, meaning how you've constructed the society itself tries to rebuff this thing of pressures that would unhinge the society itself. But at some point, certainly, just law of averages, something should come up that may tilt that society in a particular way. Now, I have an idea for this. It's unethical, but I have an idea for this. And unethical is the wrong word for it. People need to be rational. And what I mean by rational is just a basic awareness of other people, meaning if that guy's not free, then I myself am not free. If that guy can be held in bondage, if that guy can be poor and broke and unemployed and without, then I myself am also susceptible to those things. There is no peace if you're going to have this kind of inequality in the society itself. There's just not. Meaning you can never get that society, that fair society that you're looking for, that people have their needs met. If the goal is to make sure that that's understood and to keep people focused and together on building and growing their society and developing that society, I wouldn't use psychologists. I'd use something like a machine that would allow that person to live multiple lives. I would call it school. I would have that person by the age of 6 or 7 to go through a life. And 6 or 7 might be too young. Let's say maybe 12, maybe 15. They will put on a helmet. They may put on gloves. And by this time in the Star Trek universe, you should have the capacity to pull somebody into some kind of digital matrix. I'd erase their memory. And I'd grow them as kids into one life after the next, with multiple contexts and multiple situations. Empathy will be built into the process. Meaning, by the time that person finishes, they will be empathetic because they will live those lives themselves. I can think of no other way of building that into your society, into your culture, where it's so instantiated into the society itself. Having psychologists seems to be a blunt force way of doing it. Having that person live those lives is different. It's different. It gives this kind of feeling of we're the same, because we are. We have differences, yes. Some people are taller, some people are shorter, all those things. But ultimately, your inherent worth is the same. It should be respected. It should be honored. It shouldn't be this thing that's susceptible to be taken away in some kind of frivolous manner. At the very least, having a system like that allows you to understand other people in other contexts better than any other way that I can think of. It's direct experience. You don't even have to take the person from childhood, dump their memory for the short term, put them in the body of somebody for the course of a year. And look, it's digital, so at that point, a year can feel like a minute. I said that's slightly unethical, if that becomes this kind of thing that people are against. But if the society itself comes together and said, this is our school system, why would I be against it? I think it's a fascinating idea for a school system. The pain that they experience won't necessarily be lasting and real, even though emotionally they would understand it. Think about that. You give them a playground where they can't be hurt, they can't be maimed, they can't be killed, and yet they can live out whatever they need to live out. experiencing one context after the next until they reach a certain level of sophistication and rationality. The question becomes, is that taking away that kid's, what's the word I'm looking for? Is that too heavy-handed? Yeah, is that too heavy-handed? Personally, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea, even though I can see an argument of you're trying to force that kid to think a particular way. It doesn't change the genetic makeup of the individual. What's wrong with my virtual reality machine idea? Who controls the switch? It does not change the genetic makeup of the individual. The genetic makeup of the individual has nothing to do with what that person is doing or why that person is behaving a particular way. Like, so say for instance, you put a person in a machine, the person's 15 years old. That person's memory is cut off and that person lives a life of Bob Barker. As he lives that life, he goes through certain trials and all this other stuff, and he comes back, life review, and he lives another life, and another one, and another one, and another one. In each particular life, he has no memory of the prior life until he actually finishes the process. Now, who holds the switch? Yes, that's a fair point. That's fair criticism. That's fair. What they're learning is another fair criticism. That's immensely fair. Because that switch, that person can be made to learn something that's monstrous. It can be used for war in that sense. You know, it's like, the Japs are invading. Get this guy into this machine and get this guy to hate Japs. That type of thing. I'm using this war language that they were using to try to make a point. So yes, that's true. I get it. But we're not talking about a society like that. We're talking about a society that's somewhat evolved and enlightened. At least in the beginning. This is kind of the point I'm getting at. Early on after the disaster where they say we don't want this to happen again. How do we fix this? How do we shape this? And you construct a society that's ethical, moral, right, no poverty, little to no crime. You construct that society, a cashless society. And constructing that society, you say, okay, we're going to put people through education. We're not going to have teachers in a traditional way. We're going to have teachers from a machine way, technological way. Now, he's right. Who's holding the switch is important. And that's a fail point, by the way. That's a complete fail point. Because, again, it can be changed. But in the thing that I'm postulating, these people are after a disaster and they're in this kind of ethical stage. And they're not trying to fuck with people's minds. It really is set to try to make people more rational, more understanding, and more empathetic. If you can instantiate it, you might can keep it going. So, but the criticism is fair. Garnome, they would use the machine to program workers, soldiers. Technology would not save us from ourselves. I agree. No. Don't get me wrong. I keep saying this is somewhat of a value system change. But I honestly believe that the value system change, it's like it goes in tandem with the environment itself. If man cobbles himself back together, I would hope he would be a better creature afterwards. Saying that it wouldn't save us from ourselves is like saying that something in us is programmed to be that way. I'm saying it's not. It's not. You're malleable. What you see of the world, even your perspective of the world right now, even in criticizing my machine, is based on what the world is right now. You're in a particular context. I'm saying rip yourself from that context and see it from a completely different context where man is not immersed in this. He's immersed in something else that's more nurturing and more, what's what I'm looking for? It's not compassionate. It's collaborative. They're working together. They're not necessarily in this kind of antagonistic than that in this cockfight of a society. I'm saying it's a fundamentally different society. That's what I'm getting at. That's the difference between those things. To Blythe Enriquez, original Star Trek, the Death Machine, constant war, and would send people to the machine to die according to the computer simulations. Okay, you guys are putting holes in my computer idea. All right. The arguments that are being made, I'm going to stand on this point. I'm going to hold my shit. You guys are assuming that the society is something like us, something like the society that we live in. But I've made the point before, we live in a terrifying society. So pull yourself from that context for the moment. Assume for the moment you're not in a society that has poverty at all. Assume for the moment you've just finished a third world war and you've just cobbled yourself from the wreckage where everything was destroyed. You've lived through a nuclear winter. You don't want to live it again. The people in that society have fundamentally changed themselves and are collaborative all over the world. Meaning everyone over the world was affected by that nuclear winter. The entire planet cobbled itself together and became a one world planet. In being a one world planet, the people are somewhat different. The societies that they've organized is not cash based. Cash has nothing to do with it. Ultimately, they're functioning in somewhat of a resource-based economy where they're using technology to meet their needs. The cities that they're building are these kind of technological hubs where labor is mostly done by machines. The machines themselves are not owned by corporations. Everything is common heritage. All of these people, for the most part, had to fight to live, just to live after the nuclear winter. They reorganize themselves based upon the tragedy itself. They're trusting of one another. But again, that's the society to which they were raised in. As that society gets more advanced, because they're again using technology to solve their issues, their needs are met. There is no scarcity. One civilization after the next around the globe, for the most part, ends scarcity. It's a thing of the past. There is no poverty. There is no war. This is not necessarily utopia, but those things are behind us. Now, this is somewhat of a more rational society, but they've gotten rational because of what took place behind them. That's kind of the point I'm getting at. Under this thread of thinking, I can totally see people coming together saying, how do we enshrine this? How do we keep this? How do we make sure that this doesn't necessarily be toppled and taken asunder? I can also see a society that has used technology to solve one problem after the next with regards to how they're living. For instance, Jack Fresco had this idea of these kind of houses that can be custom made, and you, as a person, just program what you want for your particular house. It would make an extrusion of sorts, and a machine would come and just drop it off. Right off the bat, you've cut labor down to this bare minimum. The machine itself goes out, drops the house, comes back. That may be somebody who's operating the thing, but in one situation after the next, labor is being eliminated just by technological innovation. This technology is not predatory on human labor at this point. It's freeing human beings of their labor. If a machine can do it, that guy can go fishing. Everybody's needs are met. Nobody cares if that guy's going fishing. Yes, there's still jobs in our society. This is kind of the point I'm trying to make. It's not a jobless society by any means. In fact, there are probably more jobs in this society just because people are doing them because they want to do them. These ideas of corruption, these ideas of people trying to advantage themselves, become less pressing. You have a different fundamental society. That's the argument I'm trying to make. Whoever's holding the keys or whoever's holding that particular device, I would imagine the society itself would, in that society, that rational society, who's trying to create rational people to follow behind them, I would imagine they would guard that with their lives. And again, I could be majorly optimistic in this case. Yes, that society will probably try to seek to... Yes, that's a fail point. That's a fail point. However I think about it, that is a fail point. I guess I'm trying to make the point that somebody can criticize that particular piece of technology, but if that piece of technology is creating rational people by having people endure the experiences of others, nothing fantastic and amazing. It can even be a standard machine, meaning this particular person gets in and this person is living Todd Roy. How this person lives with Todd Roy is how this person lives with Todd Roy. It may be slightly different than the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. But what they're trying to drill into the individual is the experience of this particular person. This person is different from you, but this is this person's experience. And have that person live multiple experiences until they have some basic level of empathy. I like the idea, man. I understand the critique about the fail point, and it's a fair point. It's fair. It's fair. But the society itself is not a predatory society in the way that you're thinking of society. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Cultural ontology recapitulates phenogenesis. Yeah, I don't know what that word is. Philo, it looks like the word dealing with genes, but I'm not sure certain. Dax Jacobson, the first guy who figures out how to lie about magic bush burning becomes the voice of God. I like that one. I like that one. In any case, crisis forces people to put aside social competition, but only for a time. That's true. No, I agree with you. That's true. That's true. I'm just saying, is it possible that the magnitude of such a disaster, or a disaster can be of such a magnitude, that people grow the fuck up? Like, what you're saying about putting things aside, that's not necessarily ingrained in people. That's what I'm fundamentally trying to nail in, or make the point on. What you're talking about is based from your own context. You're not pulling yourself out of this context. A crisis happens. That crisis is catastrophic beyond anything that people have ever come across on this planet. The people who are coming from that crisis are different. They've grown up. Now, if it destroys that prior way of life, this kind of capitalistic system, then they are fundamentally something else. We don't know what their society is going to be like. That's kind of my point. Human beings are malleable. However that society is, those people are going to be shape themselves to contort to whatever the society is. It's not an issue of good or bad. It's only the consequences, how it's arranged, what it's like. If the war is bad enough, it may destroy all of this notion of capitalism. Whatever they come up with may be something fundamentally different. Whatever that fundamental difference is going to some degree shape how they interact with one another, how they arrange themselves. People are going to be different in that society. Like, for example, if you're, say it's the society I'm talking about, where they're like, we have certain needs based upon the nuclear winter. Okay, we need to use technology to do X. That technology filters, whatever. But one tool, one technical device after the next, they build their cities around this idea of technology. That's not owned by any particular one person. That's owned by the group, by the collective. That's a fundamentally different society. That's all I'm saying. It's not a capitalistic society. To say that people are going to be a certain way, people are going to be a certain way in that system. People will be a certain way in a different way in a different system. Here we go. Gardnome. The context you want me to put myself in is fantastical. Sure, I could imagine it, but getting to anywhere near that point is going to take hardcore realism. I agree. It is. It's fantastical. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I didn't say it wasn't this kind of thing. It was just it's a thought experiment of sorts. There's a massive nuclear winter. And are you telling me that you can't necessarily see that taking place if we get into a war with Russia, China, and Iran? versus the United States and whatever lonely souls that decide to tie its star to our burning wagon, it would be a nuclear winter. What comes together after that is my question. Now, that's not necessarily a fantastical thing. If Hillary Clinton took office, Hillary Clinton was going to put a missile defense shield in Syria. If that missile defense shield shot down a Russian jet, if it shot down a Syrian jet, the United States would probably have been at war with Russia. If we're in a war with Russia, we're in a war with China. Both of those countries are nuclear nations. Syria will likely sign on to that. Iran will likely sign on to that. North Korea will likely sign on to that. What does the world look like when everything is destroyed? Does capitalism exceed the destruction of everything? That's what I'm asking. If not, if it doesn't, meaning if you give me, at the very least, that depending on how much gets destroyed, depending on how many people are murdered and killed, that what they come together when they reform society, when they crawl out of whatever the hole they've been put into, how many ever years it takes, 50, 100, will be something fundamentally different. That's all I'm saying. And if it is fundamentally different, those people will be different. Understand, you have to give me this. Society itself, how people arrange themselves, how people interact with one another, to some degree is based on the software of the society itself. In the capitalistic society, you work in order to make enough profit to eat and live and everything else. This breeds poverty, this breeds crime, this breeds aberrant behavior. Those are things, those are repercussions of the system to which we find ourselves. A different system, people will behave differently. That's all. It is fantastical, but Dax Jacobson, I feel bad you guys have such lives that you don't think people want to be good. I don't know the context. I do think people want to be good, though. I do. But that being said, whether people want to be good or not, they're still stuck in this thing of, I need to live. I need to support myself. You think the used car salesman is a horrible person because he sold somebody a lemon. That guy had a wife and kid. How is that guy going to feed his wife and kid? Selling cars is the only thing that I know how to do. It's not that I like it. It's not that I love myself for doing it, but I have a wife and a kid. Now, does that guy want to do good? Yes, probably. All things being equal. What is doing good versus putting food in my kid's mouth? I'm saying you're caught in these quagmires, these ethical quagmires left and right, just functioning in the system itself. Doing good is always leveraged against being able to eat, being able to live, having some sense of status, making ends meet. It's not that I don't think people are bad. In fact, it's the opposite. I don't think people are bad by nature. I don't think people have a nature in one way or the other. Society, for the most part, drills certain things in. And then they have to live a particular way, meaning they're going to do what they need to do to get their needs met. Bob Romero, Damon Knight's A for Anything showed that even machines that could create anything can result in barbarous societies. Yeah, that's true. I mean, of course. It depends on the society. It does depend on the society. Just because you can have a machine create things, you can create horrible things. Yeah. Garnome, you think people are blank slates? This is demonstrably incorrect. I don't think people are blank slates. I've never said that. I've always said that's an aspect of the person, that's them. You can look back at my videos, I've always said that. But that aspect that's them is rubbing against the society itself. It's bumping up against society. There's certain pressures that society are putting on people. How they were raised, their culture, all those things. So yeah, I don't necessarily think they're blank slates. But I don't necessarily think they're functioning purely on their own power either. I think their society has a huge part in who they turn out to be and the values that they hold. Yeah. Bob Brumanersa. Since all material objects have become essentially free, the only commodity of value is human labor. But the only commodity of value you can make a case has always only been human labor. Like, you pull a rock off the ground. The rock is nothing until you mine it. I mean, that's human labor. The chair that you get, you have to make it. That's human labor. Like, anything that's done, for the most part, anything that you get, anything that you buy, anything you put your hands on, has been some measure of human labor. Human labor was always a thing. I think you're saying if you have machines that could make those things. Like, you create a machine that can synthesize or create pretty much anything. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. In fact, you can see that in a different way too. Like independent media, believe it or not. Like, you have this phase where people look at politicians and they want a real person. Or they're looking at a news person and they want a real person. They look at that guy and it's like, that guy's plastic. That guy's plastic. That guy's lying to me. I want a real person telling me the news. And so you have people looking for actual real people. It's like, be honest. Just be a person. Stop being plastic. Stop being phony and false. Be a human being. You see that a lot with this kind of drive towards independent media. So yeah, that makes sense. I can see it. I can totally see it. Alright, well, here we go. Gardenome. Gardenome is taking shots at me. I like it. I love it. Do you think genetics plays any role in behavior? I have to be honest. I don't know. I've always taken this position that kids are not blank slates. That's literally the position I've always taken. I don't think kids are blank slates. I think you can see difference in temperaments and behavior. I want to say, yeah, genetics does. All of your emotions and everything else, for the most part, are chemicals. If those things are chemicals, those things have something to do with biology. I would imagine how somebody is wired. Yeah, some level of genetics. Even genetic weaknesses. One of those interesting experiments, he dealt with famine, and they were looking at the genetic line of the people in this particular village that experienced the famine, and they could see results of the famine going into their genetic line like 2 or 3 genetic lines later, like generations later. It was still built into their genes. It was weaknesses from the things that were taking place. Essentially, that famine all those years ago made their genetic line a little bit weaker going forward. That was a fascinating study. It was a fascinating study. So yes, I do believe genetics have to play in it. But do I believe that's the end all be all? No. No. Not at all. If Superman was born in Russia versus Superman being born in America versus Superman being born in China, come on. Same guy. But certainly, there's an aspect of Superman that's going to be Superman. This kind of, I'm going to do the right thing. But your society is, for the most part, determining what that right thing is. That's the point I'm trying to get at. If Superman is in China, his ideals of what's right is different than if his ideals are in America or if his ideals are in the USSR. Your genetics plays a role, yes. I agree. People are not blank slates when they're born. I don't believe they're blank slates. But who they are, the degrees to which they think, the ideas to which they latch onto, those things are elements of their society and the people they're bumping into. Yeah, Gardenome is a learned man, so he knows that study. Yes, it's an interesting study. Some say that other forms of trauma have similar effects. Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. My grandfather was a rabid alcoholic. He didn't get liver failure or anything else. His son did, however. His son did. His son was also susceptible to alcohol, in that sense. Yeah, I could believe it. I could believe it. It's like we're passing these things on. Not to mention that what we're doing to the environment itself, what we're doing to food. People, there's some guys out there who are like, who are taking shots at me because of I'm not on board with the GMO thing. I think it's fucking horrible. I don't eat genetically modified foods. And they're like, come on, man, that's just science. Science has a built-in idea of falsifiability. At any point along the way, something could be brought out that falsifies that information. What that means that you can't know that. There is no bulletproof thing in this case. These people just want to make cash, and they're doing this process purely for the sake of cash. They want to spray shit on it, what glyphosate or whatever it's called. This is their profit-making enterprise. That stuff was essentially, if I'm not mistaken, banned in many Western countries. It was also set as like a hazard by the World Health Organization. One of those guys was like, this stuff is safe. I drink this whole bottle. The guy says, hey, I have a bottle of it right here. Would you like to drink it? Hell no. I'm not drinking that stuff. There's a Vice thing with the GMO thing with Monsanto. I would advise people to look at it. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's unnecessary. This is kind of the point I'm getting at. They're putting our food at risk for profit-making enterprises. Has nothing to do with feeding 9 billion people. It has nothing to do with any of that. How much cash and profit can we make doing this particular enterprise? That's all it boils down to. That's all it boils down to. And in the process, we're going to spray massive amounts of shit all across the world, and we're going to make all these singular crops all across the world, and we're going to tell the world that everything is perfectly okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't buy that. You're doing something that I believe is completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. You can feed all the world without doing that. I'll give you an example. If you took one of those high-rise buildings, let's say in Richmond, hell, take City Hall, and you fill it with food, meaning plants and everything else, and you rig the system to be hydroponic, how much crops can you make in that? You can use less water and all this stuff. There are solutions. There are technical solutions to one problem after the next. They don't do those things because they say they don't have the cash to do those things. Money's not real. People are. Those people starving. Yes, I don't like GMO products. I don't trust it. I don't trust it. I don't trust the profit motive built into it. I don't trust the fact that it's unnecessary, and I don't trust. I don't like how Monsanto interacts with those companies abroad either. So, GMO is not a necessity. Garnome, we are in amazing disagreement today. We are in total disagreement on a lot of stuff today. We have damaged our genomes of many natural crops through cross-pollination, etc. Now we need GMO to support those systems. I'm going to give you the Mike Pence head head shake. Do you remember Mike Pence was in that debate with, I think it was Tim Kaine. And Tim Kaine was nailing Mike Pence on one thing after the next. And it was true stuff. Like, it was easy to hit him with, in particular with stuff with Donald Trump. And Mike Pence, looking like somebody's grandfather, would just sit there and say, it's a Mike Pence head nod. It's like you're lying with a head shake. It's awesome. I don't like GMO either, but we've painted ourselves into a corner. We have not painted ourselves into a corner. I'm sorry, we haven't. Okay. Say, for instance, you had an enlightened president. Say it was me. Say it was me. Say through some weird scenario, I end up in office and I end up being president. If the issue was food production, here's my thing. It's not that we've painted ourselves into a corner. The problem becomes this thing, issue of will, political will to do something. We have immense technology. We have sources. We can do those things. We can turn this world around within the course of 10, 20 years. That's not what we do. We haven't painted ourselves into a corner. We have the capacity to change. We just don't change. We just don't change. Like I said, you can have hydroponic crops grown in buildings. Hell, some of these buildings, these factories that are out of business, you can grow hydroponic crops. Guarantee jobs to American workers and have those guys build those buildings up with these hydroponic systems that would allow food production and give that food away for free. You could feed trillions. We don't have an issue with scarcity. We don't have an issue with food production. We haven't painted ourselves into a corner. All of these things are issue of human perspective. Our problem is perspective. Garnome, we fucked up the genomes and the population is exploding. It's not that I disagree with you about our behavior in regards to the stuff that we've been planning and everything else. It's not that. I just don't think I think if you continue at the same momentum that you're going, then yes, you're right. If you say stop, and you stop doing what you're doing, then no. I mean, it depends on the world that you're postulating. If you're postulating a world that, yeah, humanity doesn't do anything different, then yeah, maybe you're right. If you're postulating a world where humanity grows the fuck up and says, okay, let's stop doing this. Let's take over a new leaf. Let's support our habitable space. Well, that's different. That becomes a little different. That I agree with you on. We won't stop until there are crises. Yeah, I agree. This is kind of why I say I'm pessimistic on this. I'm cynical on it. I think we're going to hit a wall. I think we're going to hit a wall. Whether that's war, whether that's climate, whether that's ecology, whether that's food losing its nutritional density, whether that's social collapse. Pick a pony. But we don't change. And I don't quite understand what's the guy's name? Misi. I can't think of the name. He did this work on hegemonic thought. Like, why do people remain in the way that they do? Why do they support systems that work towards their ends? Like, you have all these people who are supporting Trump, and Trump is going to gut them at the first sign he gets the chance. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Yeah, I don't understand it. I have to assume that that's cultural. I can't believe that that's genetic. If those kids were raised in a different society, would those kids be different, or would those people be different? I have to say yes. Would they be more geared towards maybe certain hateful thought? Yes. But would the degrees of that hateful thought be limited by the society that they're in? Maybe, yeah. I think so. I think so. I think you have this entity of sorts, and who this entity is expressed by the experiences that he has. It's almost like it's the becoming of sorts. Those things that you bump into, those things that you run into, the society itself, the things that you agree with, the things that you push away from you, all of those things define who you are. The ideas that you would be exposed to would be different in a different society. That's the point I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. You may have certain thoughts, but those societies may express those thoughts in different ways, in different degrees, in different latitudes. We just live in a terrifying space. I licked a pic of Hillary on a live stream. What? Yeah, dude, you're doing hate speech. You're doing hate speech. I have no idea what you're talking about. Gramisi, that's it. Gramisi, that's it. That's it. Thank you, Tabitha. Dax Jacobson. I know the progress is thin for people of color, and that sucks. But some things seem to have gotten better for other groups. Yeah, there's incrementalism. That's true. There's incremental change. I guess I look at this from the standpoint of what could we be, if that makes sense. Like, I look at a few things. What is it like around the rest of the world? And I've traveled to many of those countries, and I look at those countries, and I get back here, and I think to myself, if I was born here, like, look, I have two things that hound me: medical bills and student loans. The annoyance of that is, it feels like it's like those are the two things that are almost, you can't get away from. It's almost necessary. It's like you can go through your life without college. That's true. But at a certain point, you pay for not going to college. They have you over a barrel, in a sense. If I was raised in Germany, if I was raised in any of those Western countries, I would not have any bills. Like, I didn't fall into pit traps of like buying a television and paying, you know, 4 times as much because it was finance or any crazy stuff like that, or credit cards or anything like that. Mine was specifically those 2 things. It's aggravating. It's aggravating. It's like, and then to have traveled to each of those countries, and it's like, if I was born here, none of these things would be an issue. The society itself looks at it and takes care of those things. Even, hell, man, even Germany. Like, so Germany has this thing where if you have a kid, the government sends you a stipend until that kid is 18 years old. The government does that because the government recognizes the worth of its citizens. And in recognizing the worth of its citizens, it understands that if it wants to have a strong, cohesive society, there needs to be a basic level of subsistence. This goes into this thing of this kind of societal thing. That person needs his needs met if it's going to be a decent human being. Oh, man. It's aggravating. It's aggravating. Gardner's joking me. What is he saying? What is he saying? Don't lick Hillbot or she might short circuit. I haven't licked anybody. Gardner said we should be on Mars, or should have a moon base. People should be living to 120 in a natural environment. We should be flying cars. There's this awesome video with a commercial with Avery, the guy who used to play in Deep Space Nine. He's like, "Where's my flying car?" He's being really insistent. I want my flying car. Where's my flying car? He goes into this entire commercial where he's talking about wanting a flying car. It's so awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Bob Ramirez said, Japan is facing a tough next generation. People there saying they gave up their monoculture and lost their way. Tobaitha Enriquez, need to counter hegemony. I always messed that word up. Change large groups of people's common knowledge, common sense. Most of our society makes no sense when you examine it. That's true. $5 trillion a year spent on sequel shit. Who knows what they're doing? Yes. Gardner, Avery Brooks is kind of a loony man. A little bit. I agree with you a little bit. Have you seen him on Captains? There's this video called Captains. And it's William Shatner talking to the other Star Trek captains. Avery Brooks is on something, man. He is stoned off of his ass. I don't know what he has. I want some of it. He is stoned off his ass. And look, I don't know if he's stoned, but he seems to be on something. He can't keep a cohesive conversation. And he's like playing musical notes and all this other stuff. And William Shatner can't get a word in with him. And so William Shatner just starts playing on the piano with him. That's all he can get out of him. Yeah, it's funny. Tabitha Enriquez, only makes sense for the few, but we're kept in the dark about our own history and even what we're doing in the world now. Yeah, that's true, but yeah, that's true. I guess I don't know my feeling on it. Yeah, there's a feeling there. I don't know what the feeling is yet. There's something there. Jesus Christ, I need it translated. It's like there's a feeling. I just don't know how to explain it. I guess my feeling is, where's your stake? Yeah, let's start there. Where's your stake in the ground? So I came to this thing of like, how do I justify what I believe in versus somebody else justifying what they believe in? So say you're in a conversation with an American libertarian. How do you justify your view of the world versus his view of the world? There's no God above. There's no hell below. You're radically free. Now, if you're radically free, where do you find your center? How do you find your justification for anything? Where is your purpose? You know what I mean? Like if in politics, this is secular. How do you win that argument? Now, the catch is, you can't necessarily win the argument purely just based on I think this versus you think this. You have to bring it into real world situations. What are the consequences you're willing to live with in a real world situation based on your ideas, based on those things that you believe in? I put my stake in humanity, in humanism. I want the emancipation of man. I want man to be free. I put my stake in the ground in making sure man has the things that he needs. And part and parcel to that is making sure the environment is intact. Those two are real things. That's my basis. That's my stake in the ground. Any argument, any conversation is going to be based on that. I believe that human beings have value. I believe that they are an amazing resource. I believe they are the most precious resource that we have on this planet. And pursuant to that, that should be honored. That should be understood. Now, the other arguments are based on this kind of capitalistic idea of markets, but those ideas of markets over people as if markets matter more than real things. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that a market is more important than a person. You never make me believe it. So yes, if I'm putting my stake in the ground on that, I'm looking to build a society that doesn't have poverty, doesn't have crime, doesn't have any of those things. So yeah, when I'm making arguments about where I want to move the society to, that's where I put my stake in the ground. So any policy that I take on would try to achieve certain objectives of getting rid of poverty, crime. How do I make people's lives easier? How do I make people free? Or how do I get people to the point where they can be free? Now, does this require knowledge of history? Like, what does it require for a person to say, yes, working 40 hours a week at a job that I hate is freedom? Like, that's not freedom. Freedom is something different. That's not freedom. What does it take to get that person to say that? I don't know what it gets to that person to say that. Keeping them in the dark. Yes, that's true. There's certain, but that information is available now. If they're in the dark because they want to be in the dark. Yeah, that's the feeling that I'm trying to get at. It's like your freedom is there, man. You have the capacity to look up anything you want. You just have to have the curiosity to do it. Now, again, this is one of the things that people are different. I don't believe people are the same with blank slates. I don't believe that, just because you try to push somebody to be in an education thing, that those people are going to automatically look up information. People are different. It's okay for them to be different. Look, obviously, I wish people came together in a different way and thought to themselves, we can have a different society. We just have to agree on certain things. I don't know how you get people to do that. We have a competitive society. We have people that are always at each other's throat. Everything is looked at as a competition. Everything is looked at as a threat analysis. Am I going to get my needs met? Is that person going to attack me? Is that person a threat? Is that person of a certain culture that I don't particularly like, or I think is somewhat threatening, or I think it's a certain way? I don't know how you unravel that at all. I have no clue. Moving towards something? Yes. Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. Moving towards something. Part of the major problem in this is bribery. Each person along the economic spectrum is being bribed to some degree. Every person, the majority of people, dislike the direction of the country. Completely dislike it. The majority of the country, for the most part, has this idea that things are going fundamentally wrong and that something needs to be different. They believe that these people are being bribed in Congress. They understand that Congress is not doing what they themselves want them to do, at the very least it's the best interest of the public. The approval rating of Congress is abysmal. The approval rating of media is abysmal. And yet they eat their Cheerios. They pet their kids on the head. They go to work. They rinse and repeat. Despite hating it, despite disliking it, they still follow suit. Now, I think this boils down to, again, bribery. They understand this idea of scarcity. They can see the people on the street. They don't want to be those people. They understand that if they miss paying this particular bill, if they lose this particular job, they're going to be without. Their car is going to get repossessed. Their house is going to get taken from them. They may lose custody of their kids. They may lose their marriage. All of these things, their lives may fall apart. There is perpetual insecurity. The 90% are in perpetual insecurity. They understand this idea of scarcity. They try their best to do what they do in order to make their way in the world. If that's working at Walmart, they work at Walmart. If that's 40, 50 hours a week, they work 40, 50 hours a week. They eat their Cheerios and they work their jobs and they make a bare subsistence. That's not freedom. That's all I'm saying. That's not freedom. There is no context where that's freedom. When these guys are talking about liberty and freedom, they're not talking about for you. They're talking about freedom for people with means. You're in a capitalistic society. Your range of freedom is based upon the amount of capital that you have at your disposal. If you have a huge amount of capital, you are a master of that domain. You have all the freedom in the world. If you do not, where are you eating? Where are you living? How are you living? What school is your kid going to? What is the condition of the school that your kid is going to? Where are you taking your vacations? Are you taking your vacations? Your life is fundamentally different. This idea of freedom and justice is insanity. But the 90% eats their Cheerios. They play their Xbox. The band plays on. I don't know how you wake those people. The conditions that they're in, you would think that they would want to wake up. If they look across at the world, just across the pond, even with a conservative Britain, they would understand that this country is fundamentally different than its European neighbors. And when I mean different, I mean worse. If you're talking about infrastructure, if you're talking about the government apparatus itself, that governing apparatus no longer has the capacity to actually govern. It can't solve any of the problems that are presented to us. They don't even bring up this idea of automation, even though automation is going to be one of the things that structurally unemploy millions. It's going to unemploy millions. Off the table. We're talking about healthcare and whether or not we're going to murder a bunch of people in North Korea. I don't know how you wake those people up. That's my point. I'm chopping a lot of wood to get to the same point. But to some degree, it's bribery. Like, you can't blame them. They don't want to have their needs not met. What are they going to do? After working 50 hours during the week, are they going to go out and protest? They're going to keep their head down and do their job. Are they going to think of these wider things when you're working 50 hours a week and you're just barely making ends meet? What about the next guy up? 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. All of these people are financially insecure. All of these people, to some degree, are accepting a certain stipend. That stipend keeps them shut up about the system. They know these people are bribed. They know the media lies to them. They know they're being ripped off. They know they're being exploited. But at the very least, they have enough to keep going. And they know what's it like at the bottom. You have a society full of people being bribed. That's my point. It's one thing if you had a society of fairness, but you don't have a fair society. It's obviously not a fair society. It's known that it's not a fair society. Now, they find different scapegoats in the society itself to blame for this. But it's understood on the left and the right that society is not fair. There's something wrong with it. But again, it doesn't change. It doesn't change. Now, Trump and Sanders is just kind of trying to wrestle control in a way. Trump is a grotesque human being. But those people wanted something different because they weren't getting what they needed in the other regular politicians. So they went to Trump. I don't know how you change it. That's all. Like, I don't see people raising their pitchforks and running to the post office. I don't see people pushing back against police abuses. I don't see people pushing back against all of the extinctions that have taken place over the last 50 years. I don't see people caring about plastic in their oceans. I don't see them caring about the climate being destabilized or the food getting more nutrient, less dense, or less nutritious, I should say. They're watching football. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's off the radar. So, I don't mean to be pessimistic, man. It's just, I don't, you would think just a look across the world would give a different impression to the American public, but they don't. They hear these guys talking about rugged individualism, not realizing that when they're saying this, they just mean we want to be individuals because we have a huge amount of cash. And so we want you to leave us alone. So let's be individuals and let's lower our taxes. It's not for them. The arguments that they make for the public, it's almost like a public relations person, the politician. Hey, what do the plutocrats want? The politicians will tell you. It'll be their policies. They'll code it a different way. They'll say whatever they need to say to their respective bases. But ultimately, the policies that they're pushing up, it's not for us. Public knows it. The public gets it. Trump wouldn't be in office if the public didn't. Yeah, I don't know how you get him to change, man. Gardone, people aren't equipped to deal with these sorts of problems. We're equipped to scavenge and build tools. People, it's not about being equipped or otherwise. People are equipped for what they're trained to. Like, this is kind of my point, man. Your society, if your society is contorted in a particular way, then yeah, you're going to get certain behavior. Like if you had a society that, say for the moment, let's say I had an island, and on this island there was a certain amount of people, and I said, okay, look, we need to figure out what's the carrying capacity of this island, meaning how many people can we put on this island and still have a decent, thriving civilization. We do that. We say, okay, we need to add in things that take into account the environment while at the same token allowing us to live. Okay, you do that. You put in energy production, you put in food production. You design your society in a way that you want to design your society. The people living in that society have their needs met. There's no poverty, there's no hunger. Machines handle most of the labor. People, they have their doctors, they have their teachers. Everybody in that society can go to school. Now say for the moment you have 10 million people in that society. That's 10 million people that are not in poverty, but to any degree. They live where they want to live for the most part, within reason. They have access to the things that they need. No, they don't necessarily own cars, but you press a button, the car comes to get you, or there's public transportation to get you to anywhere you want to go in the island. Now, in this model, imagine the number of doctors, or physicists, or teachers. Imagine the number of people who go into these sciences and these fields, these engineering fields. Hey, you're going to get some people who just like sit at home and play Xbox. That's true. But you're also going to get a lot more people who in the normal circumstances would have been living in a ditch, would have been living in some crack house, would have been living in some other place, that they would have been poor and unfortunate and, ignored by their society. In this case, these people have access to everything that they need in their society, be it education or healthcare. You've created a superior society that these people are living in. Corruption and all this other stuff, for the most part, goes away. Now, you do have this thing of, I want to be better than this person, but that competition is within certain things. So this scientist wants to maybe he wants to be the top dog. But ultimately, you have a society that's based on cooperation. I'm just saying that's fundamentally different. The number of scientists and the number of resources that you're using or that's at your disposal is immense. You don't have money being a hedge. The society has no debt. There's nothing over your head. There's nothing over your head at all. Every day is a Sunday. The work that you're doing is because you want to do that work. You're eager to do that work because it's work that you yourself chose to do. I'm just saying you have a fundamentally different society with less stress, less crime, less all of that stuff. All of these vagaries. Thing of the past. The context of people just being apes who are just set to do tools and build things. That's just because of the society those people were in. And this particular society, most of the processes are being done by computers. You know, how do we do this? How do we do that? How do we do that? That's not a congressional decision. That's not some kind of ideological perspective. That's a technical question. How do we provide healthcare to everybody in the country? How do we build protection against thunderstorms? How do we build an engine, or how do we build a system that would allow energy to be conserved and yet everybody have their homes built in a particular way to conserve energy? How do we conserve goods? How do we make sure everyone have their needs met? Those are technical questions. Those are not ideological questions. I'm just saying, yes, there's a genetic nature. I mean, there's something of person being a human being. But our context is so mired in this muck that it's hard to rip yourself out of it and see the other context. This society grows irrational people because you need to be a certain level of irrational to get along. In a rational society, it will be different. At least that's my thought. I could be wrong. That could be somewhat of an ideological position on my part. That might be true. But I do think it's true. Oh, Garnome, I know. When I do a call-in, I'll let you have a go at me. It's slightly unfair because I can just kind of say whatever you're saying and nobody. You know. I am quoting you fairly, but you're right. You can only give a simplified commentary. Dax Jacobs, dictators. We all want to be the dictator. That would be a good guy who sets things up, but after a while, we have 10 wives and no bunghole, and we always get a hole in one playing golf. What? What? Let me read this again. Dictators. We all want to be the dictator. That would be a good guy who sets things up, but after a while, we have 10 wives and no bunghole, and we always get a hole in one playing golf. It's not utopia. That's what I'm saying. I don't... Maybe what I'm saying sounds like utopia, but that's just in comparison to where we're living now. It's not utopia. I can think of several problems associated with it. In any society, you're going to have this situation of labor. Yes, you can have machines to do the overwhelming majority of labor, but if we're talking about right now, maybe 90% of the jobs can be automated. That's 90%. That's still 10%. Now, again, you're going to still have human labor. Fair enough. But there's a difference in working till you're 65 and working till you're 30. There's a massive difference in those things. That's not utopia. You still have certain issues that you need to deal with. But come on, that's better. That's better. Oh, I see. Garnome, my tool building point was we're not psychologically equipped to deal with things like slow environmental degradation, some things and other problems. Yeah, it's like a frog in water. I know what you mean. That's true. That's true. It's like scientists say, hey, the climate is changing based upon your behavior. And you're like, I don't see it. I don't see it. It feels okay out here. It feels perfectly fine. You don't see it change. It's almost like you don't see it. It's not immediate enough. We need these things to be in the moment. This is going to happen in a year. This is going to happen in 6 months. Not in 20 years, you're going to get hit by some nebulous thing that you can't necessarily put your hand on or can't necessarily see. You can't point to any one particular storm and say that's climate change. It becomes a little difficult to get across. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's very true. Tabika Enriquez, LMAO, laughing my ass off. She's laughing her ass off. The NK has a cheese addiction and no booty. Oh, wow. She's bashing Kim Jong-un, Rocket Man. Fair enough. It snowed today, dude. It snowed. They are lying. Right. Yeah, I've heard that argument too. It's like, hey, man, it's the sun. The sun is causing it. And you kind of make the point of, you realize that we're in a solar minimum. Like, when the sun goes to maximum, it's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. It's like, it snowed today, man. It feels nice out. I've even heard the argument, hey, when that ice melts, we can actually go and get the oil that's in the Arctic. These people are maniacs. Bob, same here. We're almost in October and it's been like 90 every day. Oh, I see. You're talking about Kim Jong-un. His dad scored the Holy One. There's this video where the other one died. And you could see the people crying in the streets. Like the newsman was losing his shit, crying. And my wife was laughing so hard. And it was like, it was funny. I gotta be honest, it was funny. It's a difference in culture in this sense. They're programmed in a really harsh way. They're programmed in a really harsh way. So this guy is supposed to be like God. And you're like, do they actually believe it? Or is that what they say because they're scared of saying anything else? It's like, yes, Kim Jong-un speaks 50 different languages. There's a teacher who lived there for a while. And she was like getting pictures and documents and information. She wrote a book about it. And she called them her sweet little liars. Her students. She was called her students her sweet little liars. And she said they were the nicest kids, but they would lie so much to her. She'd be like, yes, you know, everybody else speaks Korean around the world. And it was like they would say Kim Jong-un spoke 80 different languages or something, some ridiculous number, and that the world spoke Korean because they decided that it was the best language. It was just insane stuff that they would tell her. And she would be like, do they believe this? Do they believe this? I don't know, man. That it would be a tragedy to attack that country. It would be chaos trying to get those people deprogrammed. It would be chaos. It would be utter chaos. And is there a good faith belief that he would drop a nuclear bomb on either Japan or Seoul? Even if it's a fuck up and it hits Japan or Seoul, that's a problem. There's no nuclear, there's no military solution to North Korea that doesn't involve a massive amount of lives being lost. That's the truth. He's a puppet to who? China pulling his strings. I don't know, man. I don't think China wants us over there. I really don't. Now, China has made the point that if the United States want to avoid any kind of conflict, stop the military exercises. Stop the military exercises. We're pretending like we're going to invade North Korea like every year. So, you know, the United States in that last war, in the Korean War, they call it the Forgotten War because people forget that we was in a war with North Korea. We killed a quarter of their population, not a quarter, I'm sorry, a fifth of their population. 20%. 20%. Think about that. 20% of their population, of an entire population, wiped off the face of the earth. Obliterated. Oh, in addition to that, we still have troops on their border. So you have a situation with the United States still having troops on their border essentially working on the side of their enemy, South Korea, who they're still at war with. The war is still going on. They have this kind of armistice, but the war is still technically going on. In addition to that, the United States has military exercises in which the South and the United States pretend as if they're invading North Korea. North Korea has seen the United States destroy one country after the next in the Middle East. Destroy Libya, destroy Iraq, destroy Afghanistan, attack Somalia, undermining the government in Syria. You can go to one country after the next that the United States has left in flames. What would the leadership of North Korea think? What would they think? They've signed a deal with Iran. Now, in the United States signing a deal with Iran, Donald Trump has been trying to undermine that deal from the day he took office. For all the talk and proclamations about not being a war president, he was trying to undermine that deal the day he took office. What is North Korea to think about the United States keeping its deals and arrangements? It's trying to destroy one. It's killed all of these other people in all of these other countries. What is North Korea to think? Should the United States trust what North Korea says when the United States has been doing bad things around the globe? This is not pity for Kim Jong-un. The guy's a maniac. But let's keep context. Let's keep context. It's not a situation as if he's just acting as there's nothing acting upon him. There are other forces at work. We are doing things that's antagonizing that country. China is right. If the United States want to get out, stop those military exercises. And China, yes, China probably doesn't want United States troops on their border, so fair enough. Fair enough. But if we're at a crossroads where we literally have the President of the United States trading insults like a child with the leader of another country who's also trading insults like a child. We're back in 3rd grade. It's just that these guys have nuclear weapons at their disposal. That guy was a reality show host, 9 months ago? And now he's potentially going to start a military conflict. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I find that amazing. Yeah, stop the military exercises. Trump just wants to do this through strength. I'm going to tell them what to do and they're going to do what I said because I'm goddamn Donald Trump and I'm a reality show host. They're going to do what I say. That's what that's coming from. That's what that's coming from. If anybody wanted to get out this conflict, that's what they would have done. They would have looked to China. China would have corralled North Korea in this case. Not now. Not the way it's going. The military complex uses North Korea as a boogeyman so the United States military can practically get a blank check. The United States military already had a blank check. The money that military spent, I did a story the other day where they spent $5 trillion with a T. They couldn't account for it. They were making up shit in their books. They could not account for $5 trillion. They gave Trump a budget of $1 trillion, and including $1 trillion because of black budget projects and other things that kind of wiggle its way into the military apparatus, particularly if you're including state apparatus that behaves as almost a military or intelligence services. $1 trillion. Can't get health care. Can't get high-speed rail. Can't get education. But hey, you can get $1 trillion to go murder people abroad. Our priorities are really warped. They really are. Trump isn't ordering this shit. It's been going on for decades. He's just a sign of stuff off and shouts stuff out in the public. Yeah, I agree. It was already there. Mouse, they do use it for profiteering for sure. Yeah, I mean, the military is, like, if you think about what they're doing with that money. So they spent $5 trillion. And in spending $5 trillion, they can't Account for it. If you're looking for a way to grease people's palms and put money in people's hands, or put that money in projects that you don't want people to see, that's a good way to do it. Who's looking at the military's budget? And at that point, is that stuff just crossed out? If you're a company and you're getting a bunch of money to build a plane, a bomb, a jet, or whatever, you're getting a ton of money. I would imagine you're probably beefing that bill up in the same way that hospitals beef the bill up when insurance companies are going to pay those bills. So, yes, they're getting a huge amount of money kind of greasing their palms. It's almost like socialism in a sense. Those weapons manufacturers, I would imagine, just sell to governments. What private citizen is buying heavy military equipment? Socialism. That's all it is. It's socialism for the rich and for these companies. But some of that money does trickle down to jobs. So let's say you're spending $800 billion or $1 trillion on the military. Somebody gets in office and says, we're cutting the military budget by half. $500 trillion. Now, we already spend 9 times. We spend more than the next 9 militaries combined. It's like 9 times what Russia spends. Some ridiculous number. But they're our biggest enemy. He's a threat. China's a threat. Everybody's a threat. We need to spend $1 billion or $1 trillion because everybody is threatening to us. It's amazing. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. To be that terrified, to be that scared of the rest of the world where you have to spend that much money in the military. Nobody wants, and look, oh, maybe I'm wrong. There are some countries that want to use the United States military for bad ends. Israel being one of them. Saudi Arabia being another. Yeah. Profiteering for sure. It's a jobs program. But it's a murderous jobs program. It's a disgusting jobs program. It really is. You could take half of that and say a federal jobs guarantee and give people a decent wage, a decent job. And you can have those people doing substantive things in their particular communities. It doesn't have to be this way. There are other ways to arrange yourself. That's what I'm saying. Dan Pike. Only if you define socialism as state control of things. Careful with that definition. Or state operation. See, socialism is such a flexible definition. When they use it in political circles, they tend to mean, you know, state ownership. But it's a little bit more complex than just state ownership. I probably... Yeah, I don't know where to lean on this. So, people try to define themselves, you know, that person's socialist, that person's a communist, that person is a this or that. I don't really like any of those. Like, there are aspects of things that are like, where I say, okay, that makes sense. If I lean to anything, I lean towards this idea of freedom. And of course, this idea of freedom boils down to me as you can't be free unless you have your needs met. There's no such thing as freedom if you're hungry or poor. It's like Republicans are like giving people health care, you're taking away their freedom. They have the freedom to die broken alone in the hospital or die being hounded by medical bills. That's not freedom. That's not freedom. That's not any real freedom. So when you're talking about this idea of freedom, you have to ask the question, what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be free? Does working a job that you hate for X amount of hours a week, is that freedom? If you hate it. What if you only make a bare subsistence wage? Is that freedom? I'm asking this question because what we consider to be freedom, I'll argue, is nowhere near freedom. It's wage slavery. I sound more libertarian in the sense of this kind of maybe anarchist in a sense, or this kind of social libertarian or a social anarchist. But even that, I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think those small communities can deal with larger issues. How does a small community deal with a global climate change? When all of these refugees are screaming into Europe, how would they deal with that? Those are issues that even states, meaning countries themselves, the single countries, weren't able to deal with. How does a small community deal with that? I'm making the point that there are certain problems that go beyond this idea of just the individual or the small clique or even the country itself. There's certain problems that are somewhat global that you need larger systems to actually deal with. So yeah, I don't know where I fall on that stuff. The definition of socialism is flexible. I know they mean state ownership. Like sometimes they mean state ownership, but it goes beyond that. I think it goes beyond that. I think it's this idea of this kind of humanness or this humanistic aspect to governance. Now we call it public control of labor. In fact, I would probably give it that definition a little bit more. This kind of workers' control of labor. But it goes beyond that to this thing of making sure the individual has the things that they need to be emancipated. Yeah. Yeah. In recent Bernie debates, even the Democrat was all, "I'm definitely not a socialist," Robert Perky. You know, Nancy Pelosi had that thing, so she was like, "We're capitalists. We're capitalists." The guy asked her about socialism. Would they be willing to take on certain policies? She's like, "We're capitalists. We're capitalists." Okay, you be a capitalist. Now, the question becomes, how are you willing to deal with, or how are you going to deal with these things that are going to affect you? I've asked the soft left over and over again, how do you deal with automation? That's just a basic question. You have all these people who are going to lose their jobs in the next decade to automation, be it cars or stores or grocery stores or whatever else. How do you deal with it? I say it again, man. Automation should be the thing that frees your society. How we arrange is the problem. It's not the technology. Technology is benign. How we are arranged, how we contort ourselves is the issue. I think of socialism like we're all put in the Super Bowl party, you know. Tabitha Enriquez, totally they remember we don't. Garnome, perhaps we should just start calling Sanders sheepy. Ooh. Tabitha Enriquez, all buildings over one floor raised the ground. All buildings over one floor raised to the ground. Robert Perky, not the Pelosi. We're capitalists. She got into it. We're capitalists. I mean, she was feeling herself. I hope I'm dead before the rich replace all the workers. You know what? I was gonna do I still may do a video on this thing of, I think I tried to do it in the 420, and I think the 420 I kind of spiraled into nothingness. I might have been a little too 420'd. But ultimately, the power of workers is consistently being decreased. You have a finite amount of time to get your shit together before you're just going to be held at the behest of capitalist forces. When they open the borders with these trade deals, at that point, labor could be exported across the globe. So if you guys are going to strike, I'm taking this business, I'm firing all of you, and I'm putting this business in China or Malaysia or Cuba or Mexico. I don't need to be here now. I don't need to be localized here in the United States. You've just been weakened. Your salaries, part and parcel to the reason they don't necessarily rise, is because there are other people that can do those jobs abroad. So workers can't necessarily push back on what these demands are. You have the secondary issue of, again, automation. Now, automation should be the thing that frees your society. But instead, laborers or capitalist forces have used it to bash down labor. There's no force. There's nothing that compels a boss to say, okay, we have this machine. Now that we can crank out X amount, we can fire these workers. He could very well say, we can just have these people work less. They don't do that. There's capitalist forces. There's reasons that they don't do that, meaning other companies and competition and everything else that forces you to keep working these guys in a certain way. But I'm just making a point that all of these things are bashing down labor. Then you had capitalists take over the political apparatus. They start paying politicians. You had Bill Clinton come in, deregulating Wall Street, crime bills. You had Bill Clinton. What was something else Bill Clinton did? Oh, of course, NAFTA. Bill Clinton attacked labor. Labor was supposed to be part and parcel, an edifice within the Democrats' stronghold. Bill Clinton directly attacked it with NAFTA. Now, Bill Clinton's logic was, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? They're going to go to Republicans? So what, I'm going to pass NAFTA. They're going to shut up about it and accept it. And they're still going to vote for me. Cynical. And he was right. He was right. As automation increases, the pressure against labor is going to increase. What is labor going to do? Labor is weakened in this country. It's pretty much dead. There's nobody who's... Look, I believe in Lenin on this part. If somebody's going to have a revolution, he should have a brain child. He should have a brain trust. You'd have this kind of organized group of people who have a very specific mission of revolution. We're going to change the way things are. And they're going to be secret. They're going to work in the shadows. But they have a very specific goal in place. There is nothing like that on behalf of labor. Labor doesn't even have a foot in the door with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party allowed the Republican Party to beat the shit out of labor again and again and again. And they did squat to help. That's the condition of labor in America. That's why labor is that way in America. It shouldn't be that way, but that's why it's that way. Workers, at some point, you would hope, would understand what's taking place. That those workers would unite. That they would have a core set of beliefs that they believe in, that they agree on. Whatever side of the spectrum, a core set of beliefs that they agree on. And they push for that in a movement. Millions of people flooding Washington. Congress can't do its work because they don't have enough cops to get rid of all those people who are flooding Congress. I don't understand why that's so difficult to organize. That's all. If you organize it once, you would have all those people for the rest of the time. Meaning you have a funding base. You have this thing of an attack apparatus. You have this thing that's a movement built into it where you can force your political will. That takes a population. That takes a knowing population. That takes an awake population. That takes a population that realizes that the issue that befalls them or that beset them based on class, not race. It takes a different population. It doesn't mean that they agree on everything. It just means that they agree on certain core beliefs. Getting money out of politics. Corporations are not people too. That's across the political spectrum. That's a safe bet. That's something we all agree on. Stop these foreign wars. Cut the military budget. That's something for the most part we all agree on. Healthcare. If you put a poll to it, single payer would win. Or at the very least, some aspect of government healthcare would win. Free education, if you put a poll to it, that would win across the political spectrum. I'm making a point that there is wide agreement across the political spectrum that if people can put their tribal, I want to say racial context-based viewing of things aside for the moment. Here's just class. Push that through. Have a class rights movement across the spectrum. Now, I don't know how to organize that. And I would want that to take place at some point where people just become, holy shit, these people are cheating us. We're being exploited. I don't see it, though. I don't see it. Trump and Republicans couldn't get that many people to vote for him. Granted, Democrats are just that bad, so they didn't necessarily pose a decent alternative. But aside from the Democrats, separate from the Democrats, I see people who are angry. I see people who are frustrated. I see people who want something different. On the left, I don't know what's taking place on the right, but on the left, they're somewhat scattered. They don't have a political thing to affect their will. Oftentimes, the Democratic Party is not a party they'd vote for. So they're out in the wilderness with regards to votes. The question becomes, how do you harness that into something that's somewhat of a political fist? How do you join that with elements on the right that at the very least agree with the basic tenets of what you're trying to push? We can have these fights after this radical center is dispersed. Just want a different world. And it's this thing of, I don't understand why these people behave this way. I don't understand why these people act this way. I don't understand why they're so okay with the way things are. I don't get it. Particularly when you look at the rest of the world and you see the standards of the rest of the world. And you're like, how much do we make? How much debt do we have now? Why do we have this much debt? What do we have for this debt? What do we have to show for it? There's no high-speed rail. No high-speed rail. Red economics. Oh my God, I can't believe you're still going. It's 3 in the morning. I started talking and fuck it, I'm awake. Let's talk. Garno, Stevie, I'm going to bed soon. I can't hang on much longer. Dax Jacobs, if you don't know people who are different, you just assume they're whatever the media is pushing. Kind of. Get people to stand up against an iconic, hated institution like Walmart. That's one possible start. Go get some rest, dude. The world will be still fucked up tomorrow. That's true, it will. That's true, it will. Walmart has weaseled its way and become part of the background for life. You know, when Brana did that people's movement thing and our revolution thing, I really wanted them to devote their resources into organizing workers. Fuck the politics. At the very least, organize workers. You can have Nina turn out there as a spokesperson, but the resources that you get and devote to organizing workers. Go to those Walmarts, go to those McDonald's, go to those Burger Kings, go to those Wendy's, those Hardee's, go to those cookouts, those Old Navies. The majority of the jobs in this country are service jobs. Go to those people. Those people are getting screwed and exploited. Talk to those people. Explain to those people why they're being exploited. You're not trying to form a union. This is not about piecemeal. This is not about continuing to be on the hamster wheel. The goal should be to win. Meaning going for the jugular. If you're going to get in office, fuck unions. I love unions. It's not that. It's just that's an adversarial relationship and they've been beat to death. Worker co-ops. Worker co-ops completely eliminates this idea of the bourgeois. It goes away. The workers themselves are running the companies. Now, that eliminates this idea of workers fighting for control. That eliminates this idea of the bourgeois at that point, or the elite in its entirety. That company would never ship its job overseas because that company is the workers themselves. It is an amazing weapon, by the way. If the goal is to get workers control of production, worker co-ops directly goes after that task. Now, government itself can help with those. The government, hell, you can pass laws that says if a company is going to be sold overseas, at the very least, it should give those employees the benefit of the doubt to buy. And the government will help supply the loan for that company to be bought by those workers. The government can take an active role in doing it. That goes after the bourgeois. I mean, it literally goes for the heart of the matter. You can have these companies going after these other companies. And yes, it's still capitalism, but at the very least, you have a situation where you've stabilized the pay that workers are getting and you've stabilized those jobs from being shipped overseas. if those guys are going to automate a process, it's very likely that they may let those people work less as opposed to firing them. You can get a different society. You still have issues with climate change and production and corruption and that type of stuff. But ultimately, the people who are running that company own that company. They have share, they have stake. That is an amazing weapon. If you get in office, that would be a policy that I would push balls out. Bob Ramirez, I'm an old fart, been raging about Walmart for decades. So far, they just build more of them. Well, here's the thing. We're not completely free of blame on this. And none of this situation, Jesus Christ, started about Star Trek. We're not free of blame. We're not free of blame. Now, I don't shop at Walmart, but a lot of people do shop at Walmart. A ton of people shop at Walmart. And if people shop at Walmart, guess what? They're going to build more Walmarts. Now, the thing is, Walmart costs the communities that they go into, I think it's like $100,000 per community. No, $1 million. Something like that. It's like $100,000 or $1 million per community. But it does so because of how little it pays its staff. The services that the people have to take on, essentially the state and government services that those people have to take on, essentially comes out of your own pockets. You have to pay for what Walmart doesn't. When those people have to get some kind of health care, when those people have to get some kind of financial assistance, that's because Walmart is not paying its fair share. The goods that Walmart buys, or the goods that Walmart sells, those are ridiculously cheap objects. You can understand that if people are making less, they're going to go to Walmart. Their dollar goes further. They don't care there's a sweatshop that made XYZ. They don't care that the worker who's selling them that is barely making ends meet. They don't care that the person who's showing them to that product that they were looking for in the store is getting some kind of financial assistance because Walmart doesn't pay very well. They don't care that the other person was getting canned goods from Walmart because, again, they don't pay that well. They don't care. They want the cheap item. This thing is cheap. I want this cheap thing. I'm taking it home. What I'm saying is, organize those people who are working at those shops. If half of the working population works at Walmart, or those stores, or stores like it, organize those people. If their life is as difficult as people say it is, organize those people. Turn those people into a movement. You had this Fight for 15 movement. The reason why I said this is important is because at some point, all of these processes are going to be automated. Like, so, you may have a Walmart, but Walmart is changing to be online, significantly so. Walmart at some point is going to try to compete with Amazon because Amazon gets to ship stuff all over the place. Prices are awesome, and yeah, it's going to compete with Amazon. At a certain point, you're going to have warehouses, not necessarily stores. You may have items that can automatically build certain things and, you know, take it to your house. You have a design and you put it design and automatically builds an object. I'm saying the store model at some point may go away to automation. You walk into Walmart, you pick up what you want, you walk out. It scans your bag, it charges you, you go about your way. I'm saying the power workers are going to get less and less and less. And they need to get their shit together before it gets so infinitesimal that they're at the whims of somebody else. That's my point. Yeah. Dax Jacobs, some towns have $2 and $3 stores and Kmarts and Walmarts, and now Kmarts and Sears are almost dead. Dollar stores. We have dollar stores here in Richmond. Yeah, we do. It's legal to be fired for starting a union. Just wondering, starting a job soon, hopefully. Yeah, it is. Walmart has union busters that they apply when people try to start unions. At-will states. Virginia is an at-will state. You can be fired for anything. You can be fired for anything. Apparently, my boss found out that I was doing videos, and there were words said apparently about this kind of displeasure. Is there Hillary Clinton supporters? When I was told about this, my response was, it's none of his damn business. I do what I want. It's my own free time. It doesn't define what I do in my private life. So yes, my response was pretty robust and pretty like, yeah, it's none of his business. But technically, you can be fired for anything. Now they can't say, you know, fine this person because they're handicapped or black or Chinese or whatever. But they just make shit up. He was late one day, so I got rid of him. Whatever. Yeah, that's what it was. He was late one day. I got fired in the hospital when I was in New York. New York is an at-will state. My kidney transplant had failed. I ended up in the hospital. I get an email saying, Jamal has been here for a year. I get another email right back after that saying, the company that you work for has been destroyed, has been ended. Workers allowed it. Workers allowed it. People took their eyes off the ball. If you're living in a society, shouldn't you care about the things that take place in that society? If you are a worker in that society, shouldn't you care about the things that affect you as a worker? I don't understand how workers are so asleep on this stuff. I just don't. You're the overwhelming majority of the population. And on matters that affect you, the position and the policy positions that you take or that you agree with are against you. I don't understand that. I don't understand that at all. It blows me away. Ooh, I'm going to try to unionize at Walmart. I keep you posted on my failure. Right to work is being contested in courts here, so I'm sure, don't really care, they can fire me. They will come up with a way to deal with you. Don't hand out stuff while you're at work. You know, I wonder, from a political standpoint, I care more about the collective will, meaning the collective vote. Like all of these people joining in unison in one very specific laser focus of an item. So it's like, yes, I can form a union. That union is always going to be in a fight with the boss. Forming a union is just a stepping stone to actually a worker co-op. A worker co-op is powerful, man. Like, if you're talking about going after the order of things, you're getting rid of management. All of those smartest people in the room who just sit around and collect rent and tell people what to do. Eliminated. A worthless class. The workers themselves run the shop. Now, if you can do that, you're talking about leveling out of society in regards to income and everything else. Now, my critique of that is it keeps the capitalistic model in place, but in a modified form, in a completely different form. Like, you have this situation where the workers themselves are running the shops. The workers themselves can make decisions in this kind of collectivist way of, okay, we're going to shut down the work time. So the work hours or the work day is 30 hours a week instead of 40. We have machines, all of our needs are met 20 hours a week. However you want to do it, you can organize it any way you want to organize. But to some degree, you have to take on the means of production to do that. Right now, the means of production are held in the hands of a very few people. If somebody is want to take over, a strong and robust worker co-op program to replace your community or your society with worker-owned shops will be a major step forward. It really would be. Let's see. My camera's freaking out on me, died on me. Alright, I am back. Your camera's like shit to go to sleep. I am back, I'm back. Yeah, I'm gonna be going to sleep soon. It froze up on me. Oh, you hurt my feelings, dude. Dax Jacobs, your camera's like shit, dude. Go take a sleep. Go to sleep. Go take a sleep. That's funny. Okay, man. I have to crash. I gotta be up in a few hours. Me too. Alright, Garnome. Good night, man. Barbara Moser. Have a good night. There was a hoopla about someone at a store at the city talking about unions. At the time, I didn't know anything about it. Yeah. Alright. I'm going to take Dax's advice. This started off about Discovery. Star Trek Discovery. 2 hours later. Alright. I am going to end this. Yeah, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I guess I was somewhat bored tonight. I did want to talk about Discovery, and I did talk about Discovery in the beginning. I may chop this up just because it's gone for like 2 hours, but maybe not. Alright, guys. Everybody have a great night. Thanks for economics. You too. And good luck with your job search, by the way. Yeah, good luck with your job search. It's not easy, man. Like looking for a job and everything else. I'm finding myself in this position. I'm a software engineer. And I'm gonna leave after this. I'm a software engineer. And in the capacity of that job, you build things, you fix things, you know. Starting off, the job was fucking awesome. And you get to this thing where you enjoy what you're doing, you're building, you're enjoying the people in the company and everything else. And sometimes you get projects that drain everything out of you. It's like this thing that you loved, you end up like, I hate this fucking thing. This is no longer fun, this is no longer exciting. But then you start asking the second question. Okay, what else can I do? Then you're stuck. You realize that you make a certain amount, and based on the certain amount that you make, you have a certain lifestyle. And in order to change, you can't go back to school. Anything else that you do is going to gut your lifestyle. It's going to cut it almost in half. Now you have a wife. You like to travel. You would prefer to be on this thing where you can travel from all over the place. Do videos. You enjoy talking. You enjoy interacting with people. But none of those things actually pays the bills. The job itself pays the bills. So it's not fun. It's not easy. I understand where you're coming from on this one. I wish you all the luck in the world. I do. There are aspects of my job that I really love. I love the people I'm working with. Like we have an awesome office, and my teacher, it's the weirdest thing, man. Life is weird. My teacher, my favorite people on the planet, one of my favorite people on the planet, ends up being my boss. That is immensely bizarre. I taught one person after the next that came into that company, and then it turns out that the guy who taught me ends up being the guy who's in charge of the office, or in charge of my in charge of my department. Believe it or not, that's weird. That makes it very weird. It's one thing if you get sick of something and you fail to somebody who you don't care about. It's another thing to fail in front of people who you actually do care about, or you care of their opinion. Hey, Mouse C, you're right. There's a lot of pushback from Walmart employees. Many of them are terrified of being associated with anyone that is pro-union. That's true. That's actually true. Those people are terrified of losing their jobs. They're terrified. So that's true. If you had a unifying thing that says, look, I don't need you to join a union. Don't need you to join a union. Nobody would know who you are. I just need you to vote in unison with me. I need you to support my cause. My cause is your cause. The money that we generate is coming from the public. We're a public-driven organization. Only thing we want is revolution. That's what we're focused on. And you have this kind of brain trust of sorts that is powered by the workers. You're telling them, you don't need to be in a union. I just need your political alignment. And you become a movement. If they believe you, you become a movement. Now, when politics comes up, that movement can push against the political apparatus. And if you can show results in that movement, meaning the things that take place, whether that's increasing minimum wage, whether that's some kind of universal basic income, whether that's some federal jobs guarantee. By the way, a federal jobs guarantee would automatically eliminate this idea of Walmart overnight. I'm not going to work here for $10 when I can get a federal jobs guarantee at 15. You make it very clear that the things that you're doing for them, worker co-ops is the other thing. Instituting a plan that allow workers to work, to essentially own their own shops. Are conservatives going to be against higher wages? Are they? Are they? I don't think worker co-ops is a leftist position. I think it's a sensible position. Our revolution seems like it's positioned nicely to do something like that. I would hope it would work with somebody like Progressive Independence Party, Draft Standards, all those groups, all those leftist groups, get together. I don't see it happening. I just don't see movement in that way. It's almost like politics doesn't necessarily understand the subtlety of going after these groups and stirring these groups in that way for some kind of political ends. I wish I knew how to do it. Wish I had time to do it. Alright, I'm going to bed. I'm going to bed for real. I'm going to bed for real. Alright, guys. Have a good night. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, write, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the work through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, everyone. Good night.